Welcome to the largest trestle on BLM property west of Promontory Summit. So this is about half a mile west of the section of Watercress and just before you get to the town of Terrace. This trestle was actually constructed originally in 1869, but we have evidence from railroad records that the center piers were replaced between 1870 and 1873. And if you take a close look at some of the piers, you'll actually notice a variety of shapes, both round and squared off piers. That's evidence of the constant maintenance that these types of trestles had to undertake over the years. And even though they're probably 10 to 12 feet above ground right now, they probably extend another 10 to 12 feet below ground to make sure that they were stable for the passage of steam trains. So this trestle was in operation from 1869 until the line's abandonment in 1943. The wood itself is a mixture of old-growth Doug fir and redwood, probably both being logged out of California and the Sierra Nevada mountains. Welcome to downtown Terrace, population 0. But if you were in 1870 Utah, Terrace was one of the largest towns in the entirety of the Transcontinental Railroad. Terrace was a large community, topping out at perhaps 800 people in the mid-1870s because of its importance as a railroad maintenance location. So steam engines needed lots of care and feeding. And so at Terrace we had a full turntable and also a quarter roundhouse that employed a good 200 to 300 railroad workers, both for that operation and also maintenance. And so this picture that I'm holding actually shows the commercial district of Terrace in the early 1870s. And so to my left is what remains of downtown Terrace's commercial district, which included chain stores like the New York store, which was a dry goods chain nationwide. There was a bakery, there was restaurants, there were saloons, there were various stores. In some of the mining district booms of the 1870s and 80s, Terrace was a jumping off point for the mines in the Newfoundland Mountains or the Grouse Creek mountain range. This place was really meant to last. Now, it's a ghost town because not only was the railroad abandoned here in 1943, but around 1900, the Southern Pacific Railroad decided to build the Lucerne Cutoff. And so they started to slowly move buildings and machinery and railroad operations out of Terrace, either to Ogden or back into Nevada. And so by 1900 to 1904, Terrace had lost most of its means of economy. You can see that not only did Terrace have a great downtown, it actually had one of the largest depots between Ogden and Elko, Nevada. And so this shows a two-story train depot and station, and this building burned around 1900 in a fire that destroyed most of the commercial district. Now, because this was a railroad town, a lot of the structures were actually owned by the railroad, and so many of them were actually loaded up on flatbed rail cars and hauled off back to Nevada. What didn't get hauled off, ranchers later came, salvaged the wood. There's not a lot of free milling wood out here in northwestern Utah. So what we see today is really a 60 to 70 year period of salvage and movement of historic buildings. And now it's left largely as an archaeological site that warrants our protection. So welcome to Terrace's Roundhouse and Turntable. So in the 19th century and even today, there's really only two ways to turn around a train. One is a Y, which we'll see at Matlin, but the most common way in a more industrial setting was a turntable. So to do maintenance activities or to turn around a train, they would disconnect the engine and the tender, which is in this picture here, and move it onto a giant wooden Lazy Susan. And that Lazy Susan would have a track on it that the train could then be rotated and then be backed into one of 11 bays here at Terrace. And so this giant crater behind me is actually the base foundation for that turntable. As you can see, it's about 10 feet deep at its core. It would have been a steam-powered turntable, which means there would have been a steam engine inside the roundhouse that would have powered the mechanics to rotate, several tons of steel, which would have been this train. And then behind it is actually the 11 bays, and in aerial photographs you can see very clearly the roundhouse and see all 11 to 16 bays. But again, by 1900, this turntable and roundhouse became useless for the Southern Pacific Railroad, and so it was discontinued, the components taken off, and moved to Montello.